Let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, so I guess we can just start by opening up to questions of this knowledge check that we asked you to do over the weekend. Do you have any specific questions or? Because you'll have the answers, so it's more of like, if you didn't understand one of the answers.
Or clarification. Who thought this was helpful, useful, good practice, good? And then couple that with, what was the name? I'm never gonna remember it. Cadoozle, bamboozle,
Oh, it's like a
cahoozle.
but we didn't do the real.
All right. Oh, great.
Oh, good.
So it had the two questions about the ankle. Is there any other information we need to know about the ankle?
What were the two questions about the
There
ankle?
was a dorsiflexion and a plantar.
1819. It's
Congratulations. You're just gonna be prepared for next exam.
Oh, wait, was that not on this exam?
It's all good.
Well, there you go.
What we wanted, that's okay. That's how we learn. I think what we wanted to do was to only do flexion and extension, right? So, let's see, where's the unit 1? This is good. This is good. Only these.
Okay.
Only those. Only those. So that's good. It's you're gonna get it right on the, and it doesn't take away from what you should know in the first test.
Right, yeah.
Miriam, while we wait, we have another question.
Yes. Okay. We can make it a little bigger.
Wow.
How do you?
I would have demonstrated this position, but unfortunately, I sprained my thumb.
I don't know how to make it bigger. Oh, wait. Okay. So, this is probably more than you would ask.
I like this question.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I guess we just break it down. So,
Well, we analyze by joint, right?
Yes.
So which is the first one? Let's do it as they come.
Yeah.
So how would you look at this here?
I would, well, first I would just look at the picture
Mhm.
and just like get my rights and left straight. Just because it can be a lot. Like we're asking right hip that you're looking, like it's a lot to get those words down. So I'd first look at the picture, then I'd be like, okay, position, right hip. Position, I'd probably write an ION somewhere on my scratch sheet paper because we know that we're asking for no.
Well, no, you're right.
Right, ED.
First of all, the caffeine's about to kick in.
No, yeah.
You're 100% correct. What your brain meant was the question position,
Yes.
ION.
I'd circle
Right.
ION, right.
And then her mouth caught motion.
Yeah.
And so it's all good. So the point that Miriam's making is that establish what the question is asking. And if it's asking position, right, you want to answer position. You want to answer based off of, am I flexed, am I extended? And on the first test, that's the only options you're going to have. Okay? You have 3 options. You're going to be in anatomical, you're going to be flexed, or you're going to be extended.
So circle position, right ED somewhere, even if it's on the line, then right hip. So we find our right hip, just this one. And then, what would this be?
What's our position
Yeah.
relative to what? What are we comparing where you at to? Anatomical, absolutely. Where you at is referenced to anatomical. So Miriam's asking, where are you at? There's no guessing. It's okay, where am I at? Based off of a straight leg.
So your first answer would be the right hip is flexed. So then left hip, so you look at the other one. Way back here, then it's extended, and then trunk if we're still looking at position, so then,
Is she in anatomical position? Is the picture, is her trunk in anatomical? So now you narrowed it down to two. She's either flexed from anatomical or extended from anatomical. Which one does that look like?
good?
Well done.
Anybody else want to walk through a question? Yes, 24.
See, all you gotta do is break that ice with that first question.
Okay.
You know, we get her over. That's awesome.
Okay, so
Oh, I remember this question.
from bottom to
Great
top,
stuff.
what motion would have had to occur?
Great stuff.
That might not be right.
What do we call this? What do we call that?
Like cat cow,
Cat-cow.
I think. So from bottom to top, your brain probably wants to look top to bottom. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna probably draw a arrow going up. So starting here, ending here.
I
So-
think on the test on Friday,
Yeah,
I think Sarah used like A, B,
yeah.
right? So just to be consistent, whether it's an arrow up to top, whether it's start to finish, or whether it's A, B.
Yeah.
You know, it's establishing, hey, this is where I began, and this is where I finished. What had to happen for me to get from A to B, or from start to finish, or from here to there, or from bottom to top?
Yeah. And also when I say I'm gonna write this down, sometimes I would write on my computer screen. So I write 24 and I go bottom to top. So from bottom to top, what motion would have had to occur to the trunk? So we start with this.
Great.
What's our starting position? Flex. And our ending position is extended. So to get from flex to extended, you have to extend.
That's it. You have to have extension.
So extension occurred at the trunk. So then cervical vertebrae, if we position is this, and we end extended, then we would have had to extend to get from flex to extended. Does that make sense to everyone?
So what we're trying to do here, guys, is take guesswork out of all this stuff. We're trying to take guesswork out of, I think it's, where are you at? Where did you go? And how did you have to move to get there? We're taking the guesswork out of it.
And also, the test is multiple choice,
Mhm.
right? But I take the test as it's like a fill in the blank test. Because if you look at all the answer options, you might be able to convince yourself
Mhm.
that it's something that it's not, or for anxiety during the test.
Any fellow second guessers out there? Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of the answers all sound similar. Flexed and flexing, flexed and extending, extended and flex, a lot of similar verbiage. So, I agree with Miriam. Look at it as a fill in the blank or practice your tools. Like when you're in the real world, when you're practicing as allied healthcare professionals, you won't have multiple choices when you're working with people, right? You're just gonna have to know based off of your knowledge and the toolkit that we're helping to develop in here, where they at, where they go, or where are they at? Question. This will come in a lot, guys, with posture too. Like when you see someone that has bad posture, say, well, where are they at and where should they be? And that's how you know how you can help them fix, whether it's pelvic girdle, obliquity, we're gonna get to scapular positioning, hip positioning. So, there's not gonna be answer choices in the real world. I put answer choices on this test because it's a heck of a lot easier to grade. But don't feel that you have to get confused with the answer choice. Good, very good point.
Anybody else? Want to go over one? How did we feel about 25? Because this was one that I wrote out a scenario and didn't give a picture.
Mhm.
Do we want to go over this one? I guess we could anyway, yeah. Okay, so when you're doing a push-up, what motion occurs at the elbow when you're lowering yourself down from the plank position back to the floor?
And I think that's a very fair question.
Yeah.
In fact, you probably didn't even need from the plank position. Just
Right.
lowering yourself down at any point would elicit that motion.
Right, so this is one that honestly I would get up and just do during the test. I would get out of my chair be the first one to stand up, because we all want somebody to be the first one. Don't get up. So if you're starting from the plank position and you're lowering yourself down, then what position?
That was my knees.
So that elbow flexion. Good. Okay. Are we all clear on the wording? Like, can we break this down and picture it in our heads? Good. Okay. Over.
I would say a majority of the questions, not all, because I gotta mix in, I never want to waste your time by learning and applying knowledge. But the bread and butter in this test is practicing verbiage and position. Where are you at? And knowing the difference between where you're at and where you might be going. Not that we won't have questions like this.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to spend all this time practicing where you're at, where you're going, and only ask you a couple questions about where you're at, where you're going. Miriam, what was your studying, and I know everybody's different, but what are some things, as you got used to how I give questions and how I ask tests, how might your study habits have evolved over the course of
Yeah. So
Takes another sip.
I guess I always wanted to make sure, even once my studying habits evolved, I wanted to make sure that I had all the words straight in my head. Because, like, that can be the weird thing. Like, position, motion, what should be the ending of those? Like, I made sure that those came, like, second nature to me. You don't want to have to think about it and quiz yourself during the test on that easy stuff. But I made sure I had all my motions correct, which that comes more for like the other tests with the abdomen abduction that you have to get straight or whatever. But then I also like came up with questions for myself, whether I was like getting milk off the top shelf at the grocery store, or like getting in and out of my car, or it's like I studied more like whatever I was doing, but also study like that with stuff that you're confident with, rather than like a crazy thing that you're not sure if you're getting it right.
Yeah.
So
The basics. You've heard me say this several times. Make your close putts. Like if you're playing putt-putt or golf, and you got a short couple inch putt, you got to make those. Right? It's okay if there's one that's super far away. You may make it, you may not. But there's going to be some questions on this test that are short, little, deep putts. Got to make those. Okay, make your short putts. And that's also where, like, if you are practicing at home and you're like, I'm not quite sure of something, that's why starting the studying early or staying up with the material, that's when we could talk about it before class or after class. Or, you know, I was doing this, or I was watching this, or I was doing this, and I wasn't quite sure about this. That's when you come to me and we have a conversation about it and figure it out.
we also have the study session tonight from 6 to 7 p.m. in the STEP lab. So y'all can come to that, absorb what other people are asking questions about if you don't
Remind me of
know.
that, and I'll post it.
Yeah.
I didn't quite know if that was said, so.
Yeah,
Also,
I'll be there.
just call her name, she'll be there.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions?
That's in the step lab, right?
Yeah.
Those were, I'll tell you, I popped in from
my
time to time. I thought those were so great.
We had like 35 people packed in.
Yeah, they were, they had disco lights on. It's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a part of the anatomical kinesiology party in there. Fire chief had to come and say something.
Cool. Any other questions like not related to this worksheet? Like
It can be anything.
it could be anything.
Mostly clarification. So the kind of questions that I would like to avoid is, what is a plane? And because that's literally like a lecture. Right? So when I get questions like that, I try my best to be patient and kind and say, why don't you go back and rewatch the whole lecture on planes? And if you have a follow-up clarification, I'll be happy to answer it. So, now in the game, it's about fine tuning. You should come to me with knowledge and say, I'm not quite sure about this, and then we can fine tune it. You shouldn't come to me with an empty bucket and say, fill my bucket. Does that make sense? You should already have some stuff in your bucket. What was some feedback from last semester, like when y'all were doing these reviews? The reviews are pretty helpful.
Yeah, I think so. There was a lot of people that I saw the light bulb go off in the review sessions.
And you know what I'd like to try to do, and I'm learning, because I'm a caveman when it comes to technology, but I'm learning. I can come back this evening and set up a live stream on the YouTube. So that way, if you can't come this evening, maybe you can watch the live stream, or if you're working this evening, you could just rewatch the live stream. I'll try to do that for you guys.
Still beneficial for people to come though.
Oh, 100%.
So that we have a live stream.
Yeah, and the biggest reason it's optimal to show up is because you get to live feedback with questions and understandings. And it's always better, but at least it's something. Right?
We all come up with random stuff while we're there too. We'll all be laying on the floor doing some random stuff. So
might look a little creepy, but we're not. We're just cat counting. Just cat counting. And again, guys, contrary to what you may have heard or believe, I'm sure some good, some bad. I understand I'm not everybody's favorite flavored cup of jet coffee. But I do care when effort is reciprocated. I really do. And I will go way above and beyond when you come to me with your bucket having some already fit, okay? Come on, you shy guys. How about some questions? Do y'all want some practice?
Yes.
That's what they wanted.
Can you show the difference between flexion and extension in each plane? Because on 17, it asks in respect to the sagittal plane.
Sure. So the clarification or the question, if you didn't hear, and let me come up to the microphone. The question was, can you give us examples of flexion extension in different planes? Okay. So what I want to make clear is that we have to remember reference. So I can flex and extend in all three global planes. That's like saying I can, look, your car is not going to go up and down, but that's like saying my car, when I press the gas, will always go forward, but based on my direction, I could go forward north, I could go forward east. So flexion and extension from whatever joint you are accountable for, knees, hips, trunk, neck or cervical, shoulder, elbow, wrist, can occur in all three planes globally. This is the room's frontal. Notice I didn't say it's the elbows. I'm sorry, notice I didn't say the elbows front. This is the room's frontal, but it's my elbow sagittal. And that's okay because I clarified whose perspective. The car is going forward, but it's going east. The car is going forward, but it's going north. See the difference? Okay. So my elbow can flex and extend in the room's frontal, elbow sagittal. It can flex and extend. This is what I did in case you want to receive it. Room's frontal, elbow sagittal. Room sagittal, elbow sagittal. Room's transverse, elbow sagittal. Because this will always be the outside of my elbow, and this will always be the inside of my elbow, the lateral side and the medial side. And a bilateral axis goes side to side. So when I'm here, the bilateral axis happens to line up with the room's bilateral axis. But as I move the elbow from the room, the elbow's bilateral axis moves with it. Right? Does that make sense?
So, for question 17, it says in first side of the plane, I thought it was extended
For the shoulders,
on the shoulder. I thought it was
a lot of people do, and we blame ESPN for that. Remember? So if you were going to get into a ball, so the question is on 17, a student thought it was extended. Your elbows are extended, but your shoulders are not. If you were going to get into fetal position into a ball, you would not want to do this. You would want to do this. Knees come back to anatomical position, hips come back to anatomical position, wrists come back to anatomical position, elbows come back to anatomical position, shoulders go back to anatomical position. So this is shoulder flexion, and it follows a similar rule. I said this in class, but I think repeating certain key things are important. Follows the same rules as the hip. If this is hip flexion, why wouldn't this be shoulder flexion? Yeah, ESPN's been brainwashing you for years, saying this is full extension. It is of the elbow, but you were extended when you were down here waiting to run after the pop fly. Shoulder flexion. You're very welcome. Do you understand that if you miss that on the test, it's not that I didn't try to clarify that several times, it's just that's how sometimes these things are etched in our brains.
And also, so it'll come more into play for the other tests, but whenever I ask for in per sagittal plane, you should know my options are flexion extension or anatomical.
Yeah.
So if I were to say a different plane, that's not for this test, but then you would be left with a different set of options.
Yeah. Anytime we name a joint and its motion, that is a local reference. We're asking you from that joint's perspective. So if we're asking for knee motion, that's a local reference to the knee. If we're asking for shoulder motion, it's a local reference to the shoulder. We do not have to clarify or differentiate plane if both perspectives are the same. So in other words, if I was here and I said, what plane would this motion occur in? Someone's going to ask, they're going to say, do you mean local or global? And I'm just going to be like, the question is worded the way I want it. In other words, it's the same. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. They both see in the sagittal. Does that make sense? If they're both seeing the same thing, then I don't have to differentiate. Now, if I was here, I have to tell you what I'm looking for, right? Global. But if the answer is the same for both global and local, it doesn't matter. Do you have a position question? Or just this one, that's a lot. Their fees on work. What do we know or what can we say about the right knee? Oh, don't mistake my silence as them being incorrect. I'm just giving everybody time to give it some thought before confirming or rejecting. Right knee. What I didn't hear, and I'm very happy I didn't hear, was flexing or flexion. Right? I'm glad I didn't hear that because we have no idea. This is just a still picture. This is a static picture. Right? All we definitively know is that right knee is flexed. That's all we know. Now, we could give a before and after. We could give an A and B. Or I could use a term such as this. His right knee starts in this position in the photo and begins to move towards anatomical position for its right knee. Well, then I know that knee has to have extension. Starts in this position, and that right knee starts moving away from anatomical position. Now, you may be like, well, he's already away from anatomical position. I know. I could be east of Lafayette and still go travel northeast. I can still go east even on east. There's nothing wrong with that. He's still got more range of motion in there. So if you start out flexed and I say you move further away from anatomical, no problem. It's gonna have flexion. But that's really good that you guys didn't just assume flexion. That's awesome. Let's see what else we got. Right elbow is flexed, left elbow is flexed, right hip is flexed, left hip, I can make a case that it's extended about 3 to 4 degrees. Remember, I'm not gonna ask little bits, I'm gonna ask obvious stuff, right? So I wouldn't probably ask left hip. Miriam, you see anything else? That left knee is probably in anatomical, close enough, extended. We don't have good views of the wrist. Right shoulder extended. Cool. Left shoulder, don't have enough info. So I'm only going to ask you questions that we could be on the same page of seeing what's happening. Remember, I'm never going to ask you that.
You said the right shoulder.
No, his right shoulder is extended. His right elbow, that's okay. See, I think that's a great point. Your brain knew what you were saying, and I do it all the time, where like we accidentally say different things. So that's why we just want to make sure on the test, like we make sure we're talking about the same thing, right? So right shoulder extended, right elbow flexed. Follow-up question, or we're good? We're good. Was that a good practice? What do you think you spend the majority of your time position-wise being in for a lot of the joint sets on the first test? Absolutely. Sitting in class, your hips are flexed. Most of the time, your trunk's flexed. Shoulders on the table might be flexed, elbows flexed. When you're sleeping, you tend to get it like you probably, I'm not saying you don't, all right? But you probably don't wake up in the bed like this. So this flexed fetal position is something that eventually you guys are going to be battling with people to help, because like if think about it like this, if you had your arm in sling, we don't sling anymore. Like unless it's like really, really, really bad. We don't cast anymore unless it's really, really, really bad. But you can imagine if you just held your arm in a flexed fetal position for weeks and weeks and weeks, when you get out of that, it's going to be very stiff, right? It's going to mess with your motion. And when you mess with your motion, you can mess with your strength, and you're going to get weakness, and function's going to be off. So being able to see these things, or I'll give you another example that I think is very practical, because we spend so much time. That's why at my age, when I get out of bed, like my wife and I would crack each other up because it hurts. And we've been in this flex position throughout the night, you get up, it's tight. And when people have tight hips because their hips have been in a sling all day, at work, in the car, playing video games, studying, those hips are so tight, and you need your leg to go straight. So what will happen is you'll compensate by actually arcing your pelvis forward to keep your hips flexed. Your hips are still in a sling, but you would never know it because you think the femurs are straight relative to that. So it's things like that that we're going to be working on, teaching you that just because the legs are straight doesn't mean those hips aren't flexed. Just as an example. Who has some study groups going? Everybody have some study groups? Everybody's competitive. They're like, I don't want anybody to know about our study group. I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, I know, because that's the only way, I say it's the only way. Let's say you're mistaken about a concept. How do you know? Unless you have someone to kind of check and wait, I'm not quite sure. I don't think that's what it is. So I think if there was exams that were just straight memorization, right? Okay, but when it's about practicing, like if you were going to be a better basketball player, of course you need to practice your free throws, and you can do some stuff on your own. But to become a better ball player, you kind of need to play ball with other people. One of the reasons that I was a decent ball player when I was a kid, it's because my older brother beat my rear end every time we played. That made me better. Okay? So we really encourage practice playing verbiage, and you get checked sometimes. Like you may think that this is extension. I think that's a great example. And you're not the only one. And I'm telling you, someone test is going to miss it because it's like Pavlov. The bell rings, and you're so confident that that's extension because that's what ESPN says. Maybe that's what you say. Remember, guys, human motion is something my 80-year-old father practices. Not as a living, but just we talk human movement. And so it makes sense that we have bad habits sometimes with some of these things. Right?
Another good thing to do to study that might make you more interested in studying is like if you're a cheerleader, go online and search up like cheerleading competition pictures and like look at these people doing flips and whatever and try to analyze each photo and see what all of their joints are doing. That's another way to do it too. It might be more interesting for you rather than looking at a person running.
All right, guys, y'all heard it. Miriam thinks running's boring.
It is
She
boring.
said it. Yeah. Let's pull up some more examples. What do you think? Let's see. I think this might work because we can do like a before and after. What do you think? Oh, you web file. I got something for you. Yoink. 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 Whoa, too much yoink. All right, Mary, ask him a question. Or you want me to do it?
From the middle to the right,
Ooh,
what
good one.
motion occurred at the shoulders?
Good one.
Think about it for a second before we blurt it out.
Good one.
So from middle to right, or if we said A, B, C, from B to C, what motion occurred at the shoulders?
Good one.
Okay, say it.
Flexion. Yeah.
Fabulous.
And if we wanted to go, I don't want to say in more detail, but it would be, he starts in an extended position. Extended, he's going to have flexion to anatomical. We just keep going. Flexion from anatomical. The whole motion is flexion. The whole motion is flexion. So position-wise, at B, like Miriam established, what's the position at B? The shoulders, sorry, good clarification. We're talking about the shoulders. What's the position at B? Extended. What's the position at C? Flexed. How you gotta move to get there? You started in an extended position, you finished in a flexed position. The road is the sagittal road. The motion, east or west, is flexion.
So then from C to B, what motion would occur at the shoulders? Yeah, extension.
And you can totally see somebody, like if you jumped up and you wanted to absorb the force coming down.
Yeah.
do that.
Okay, position of the cervical in B.
Oh, good question. I'm such a geek when it comes to human movement analysis. Such a good question.
Okay, y'all can say it. Extended, good. Because if it weren't anatomical, he'd be like looking at the floor, but since he's like this.
Does that make sense? Like if you were in a neck brace and you did B, you'd have no choice but to be here. The fact that your slinky can bend back is the reason you can keep your eyes up. Or what is the position of the neck relative to anatomical? You can do this a couple of ways. Right ear, right shoulder to look at the trunk as if it was in anatomical, and you can see how the neck's in an extended position. Or you can copy and rotate like we did with the iPad and literally put the trunk like it was straight. You'd see how the neck is bent back. Good question.
The
But we
way,
could, and there's so many questions on here, right?
the way my brain works, I don't know if this is gonna be straight, but like, oh god.
You and your lasers.
I draw like a line,
There
like
you go.
this.
Yeah.
And like, if, you know, if
Yeah,
it's not
it's true.
top of the head, then it's moved one way or the other.
This is a great example of why human joint motions aren't globally referenced. And this is why people miss it, because they just see the guy's level and think it has to be an anatomical, because bless your hearts, you were introduced to cervical flexion by like the head going forward or the head going back or something silly like that. And you can have flexion extension where the head doesn't have to necessarily do anything. Flexion, extension. Man, so many questions. At B, position of the hips, position of the knees. Position on A, position of the elbows, right? We could have motion of the elbows, bang, bang. So many cool things. We could have motion of the cervical. What did the neck do from here to there? Give it some thought. Establish a rhythm, establish a cookbook. Where am I at? We just established that, right? Where are you at in the middle picture? Extended. Where is your neck at on the picture on the right? Yeah, anatomical or a little flexed. It's hard to see with the shoulder there, but I know I'm not in the same position, right? I'm not back here. So that motion had to be cervical flexion, because that's what it took to get you from here to there. There's no guessing. As my major professor at Auburn said, it's an is. It's an is.
That option on the test could be flexion to anatomical, flexion from anatomical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or just flexion.
Yeah, like you can have all those options.
Which one would it be technically if we wanted to nitpick it? Would it be flexion to or flexion from middle to right? If he was up in the air and he wanted to look down, that would be flexion from. Ooh, here's a good trick question, but not really a trick question. Motion of the elbows from B to C. Good, good. Just because the arms moved doesn't mean the elbow moved. Remember, the elbow is its specific joint. Sometimes that'll get people confused because like the elbow joint proper technically is moving globally, but remember, when we're talking about a joint motion, it's literally the rotational component between the two bones. So if both bones don't move relative to each other, you didn't have anything. It's like if you were sitting on a bus, taking a nap on the bus is moving, but you're not moving. Like in terms of your general motion, right? Your relative motion. So don't get confused. Just because there's motion doesn't necessarily mean there's motion at the wrist or motion at the elbows or motion at the shoulder or anything. Good. That's a really good question. That might make its way on the test in some form.
This was it, right?
I think so. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So in multiple lectures, you have done this.
Oh, yeah.
So would this be more like position and or plane? Because obviously this isn't in the sagittal plane.
Yeah,
locally,
yeah.
so-
Yep. What a great question. So when I did those things, it was to show a point of these shoulder motions have the same rotation globally. Like if this was a fan, wouldn't both blades rotate? Do you mind getting the whiteboard? So watch, Miriam is gonna work with me here. Line them up, and then we're gonna go. See how that's the same spin?
Mhm.
But it's not the same motions.
Correct.
Yeah. So it was It wasn't to say, you have to know what this is, what that is. It was to demonstrate that we do not name and recognize and identify joint motions based on anything of the room. So like when you were, not you personally, but I know there's some of you that were taught, like, again, wrist flexion is when the fingers go forward, or abduction is when you go away from the midline. It's those kind of things that I'm trying to recondition your brain not to think about. Because in the shoulder's perspective, I can have one shoulder doing ad going to the midline, and I could have the other shoulder going ab going towards the midline. It has nothing to do about going towards something or away from something. It's all about the mirrored spin from the segment. So that example wasn't a test question for the shoulder frontal plane. It was an example of why we don't want to use global references to communicate locally referenced joint motions.
Okay, thank you.
No, what a great question. Good clarification. Anything else? Bueller? They don't know what that is. You don't know what that is. Back in my day, we went to a theater. All right, guys, y'all have a good one, man. Hope to see y'all at the review. Isn't that fun?